Thank you, Madam Speaker. The issues that were raised in question time this morning beg some real openness and transparency on the part of the government, because if it is true that the docking point in Victoria is to be moved from its current position in Port Melbourne over to Geelong, that would have far-reaching consequences for Tasmanians, all Tasmanians who travel or would seek to travel on the Spirit to avoid flying, or because they can't fly, or because they want to take vehicles and not fly for that reason, and also for businesses. So it really has far-reaching impacts for Tasmania. The Spirit of Tasmania is a lifeline. It is an essential part of the highway for Tasmania to connect us with the mainland. It is the basis of our ability to be able to export goods. It is the font from which our export productivity flows. It is a critical piece of infrastructure in Tasmania, and as such, it is very concerning that we only hear about it through parliamentary question time from the opposition, instead of having heard from the government. And it sounded from what the Premier said this morning, that these conversations with the Port of Melbourne Authority have been ongoing for some time. If that's true, that's a very concerning matter. If that is true, why hasn't this been? Why haven't other parties also been had that communicated with them? Why haven't industry leaders? Why haven't tourism businesses? Why hasn't the RACT? Have these other bodies being involved in these conversations? Because these aren't just conversations purely about the economics. These are conversations about the functioning of the state that goes to far greater questions than just the efficiencies, as the Premier said. The first thing is to make sure that they're cost effective. Well, that's not the only thing, Madam Deputy Speaker. That is one of the things that we have to secure, but it's not the only thing. The first and most important thing, I would have thought, if I was Premier of Tasmania, I'd be wanting to ensure that the docking position was functional for its purpose. So cost is one thing, but that is subordinate to it being actually functional and able to fulfil its purpose. Now, if we are serious, if this Premier is serious about climate change action, which I have to say, from his State of the State address yesterday, I have no confidence, unfortunately, that the Minister for Climate Change is putting this issue first and foremost on the agenda for him as Premier. Because if he was, he would understand that we have to shift from our historic focus of renewables in the energy generation sector, which we have done very well and can continue to do well. But we must move to other sectors, and that means we must electrify transport, we must electrify agriculture, we must make carbon stores expand exponentially across the state, both in soil and in forest reserves. So if this is serious, then that has implications for the electrification of all vehicles and the proximity to the heart of Melbourne. You can't have people getting off the Spirit of Tasmania from Geelong and having an extra hour's drive just to get into Melbourne. That just won't work. That's nonsense. That is really relegating us to the smallest backwater state. So I can't believe that would seriously be countenanced because it would have profound implications on travel times, on electric charging times for electric vehicles, not to mention freight and the timeliness of getting exports from Tasmania right into the heart of Melbourne to those markets, which are so precious. It is the restaurants of Melbourne within which Tasmanian produce shines and is top of the menu in so many restaurants. And it's because of what we offer that we have to get to a market. Not only does it have to sit on the boat overnight, but it cannot be stuck in traffic and not roll off in the Port of Melbourne, where all of the other shipping containers are being unloaded. That's the spot where so much of that activity occurs. And so we need to be located there as a state. So this really is an issue of transparency, again, and this government, yet again, is incapable, it appears, of just simply telling people what's going on. I mean, we've had the ludicrous situation where we still don't have an end date for K Block, and every single time there's a conversation about the Royal Hobart Hospital, it's mired in secrecy and obfuscation. At every point, we had the potential lead contamination, we got denial, dismissal, and yet later, a month later, we get reports that yes, you know, these things are being attended to. In fact, it turns out, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's one of a list of reasons for why K-Block opening has been put back yet again. Definitely. Well, the Greens raised this, Madam Deputy Speaker, the unions raised this, but were dismissed at the time. And later along, it comes out, yes, of course,
the honourable
this is a reason.
Time's expired.
So transparency
the matter
in
be
all
noted.
matters would help
Those
this
of that
government
opinion
so
say
much.
aye.